Hello and welcome, everyone. Second time that I'm on stage today. I'm very happy to be here now for this session where we talk about changing the European immigration game. First of all, why we're here today on this lunch session, we're going to talk about immigration, which is still a very hot topic. Just last week, I was in a podcast as well with a major German media outlet, and they asked me about some of the points that people still see critical around immigration, which I do not really understand because I think the other side, which is pressing issues around war for talent, around like the fact that we really need migration to survive in Europe, they are so much more pressing. And that's why I'm very excited for the next hour here with that panel. We'll look into subjects such as creating an open hiring system in the EU, enabling talent mobility from abroad to Europe, and developing new avenues for labor migration. Yep, together with our experts here, we'll touch upon recent changes in the European immigration system. Very happy to have the three of you on board. Very quick intro before I hand over. We have Damien, who's a member of the European Parliament. Then we have Philippe, who's the Secretary General of Scale Up Europe, and has worked in international economic development for several years. And then Johan, who's a partner at BCG and leading the research about global migration. Over to you, Damien, to start with a quick intro and maybe also share your view on the topic and how you're connected to immigration.
Thanks a lot, Hannah, for the invitation and for asking me to start, even though there's a very illustrious round, and I'm very much looking forward to hear the perspectives of the others who I have talked to also before, but it's good to see you again. So maybe I can quickly start by saying that once I got elected to the European Parliament in 2019, my perspective was always to look at the European labour market and also our attractiveness from a European perspective, because the party that I co-founded and got elected for, Volt, is really much focused on bringing the European added benefit forward, if you want. And I realized that I wanted to work on labor migration because I felt that often when we talk about migration, people think about asylum and they think about boats. They're all like these, connotations are very emotional to the topic. Just in very quick brackets, I don't know a single right-wing populist party that didn't grow because of migration solely. So who didn't actually, utilize the xenophobia to build their agenda and their base. And so I really wanted to work on the other side of migration, if you want, which is, international talent and these kind of elements. So I think that's, for me, super interesting. Happy to talk more about it. And once I joined the European Parliament, I realized that on labor migration, there wasn't much done recently. Had been done a couple of years before, but it wasn't really on the top of the agenda. And so then I decided that we would push for a report from the European Parliament on new avenues of labor migration. You just mentioned the exact title, Hannah, earlier. And then I worked on a couple of things like promoting the idea of an expression of interest-based model. So that basically means you try to make Europe more attractive by allowing third country nationals to just say, hey, I want to work in the EU, and then you can be connected to an employer later on. And we have proposed things in this direction called the talent pool. And then I worked in the blue card, which is really for highly skilled talent to come. And now I work on the long-term residence directive, which is really the question of can we create mobility for people who have been contributing in one labor market for some time. But to maybe lift it a bit away from me, just as a background, I think for me the big question mark that we have when thinking about European talent attractiveness or the war for talent is that somehow the countries only think about how can I be more attractive, and they misunderstand that the key factor for talent, I think, I discussed this with Johan also, we need to still find data for that, but I do think it's one of the key factors is that if we have one European labor market that can be attractive for talent from the outside. And I think if you look at the German initiatives recently, they're great, but there were some really cool French ones that Philippe was also involved in. I think we need to, connect them, and we need to create mobility so that we transfer the one labor market or the 27 labor markets into one, and then maybe we can also, win the race for talent and competitiveness.
Thanks, Damien. You already mentioned Philippe and a couple of the French initiatives. So Philippe, handing over to you for your intro.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hannah, for giving me the opportunity and to exchange with you, with Damian, Johan, and hi to everyone. Really, it's a timely discussion. To explain a bit what I'm doing and what is my perspective on this subject. So I'm Secretary General of Scale Up Europe, an initiative that is now 2 years old, that aims at helping the growth of tech scale-ups at the European level. And so we worked in different streams, just to mention them rapidly, on finance, on deep tech, and interrelations between corporate and startups. And then, last but not least, of course, talents. So talents was really one of our key priorities, and so I cannot agree more with what Damian just said. I think Europe really now is becoming more attractive. As a matter of fact, if I don't know if you had a chance to have a look at the Atomico reports that went out this morning, but they have an interesting chart about the ratio between inflow and outflows of founders and C-levels. And it shows that in all the main European countries, you have 2 times, 3 times more inflow than outflows of leaders and C-levels. So, which really says something about the attractiveness of Europe. But of course, we want to do more and to go beyond that. And for that, what we have done is that we teamed up attractiveness agencies from 15 member states of the European Union to draw a really European agenda, and they came up with a report on 3 recommendations. So the first one is, of course, to improve the existing EU blue card, and so to go exactly in the same direction as Damian is pushing, and really he's doing an excellent job on that. But we still have to push because we are not completely there yet. Could perhaps go into more detail, but there is still some way to go, I think. Secondly, to interconnect all the existing tech visa schemes. So almost every EU member state has its tech visa scheme, but clearly, as Damian rightly said, we have to look at it from an European angle, and the big scale-ups that are now emerging in Europe also are looking at their needs for talents from a European angle. So they need talents, but it could be in different countries. So the second outcome of this work is to build a service desk that will interconnect all the existing national tech visa schemes. And the third idea is also to build an attractiveness agenda to build the brand of Europe, if you like, as a place to work in tech and to found successful startups.
Thank you so much. Johan, handing over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. Thanks for having me, and thanks for inviting me to this phenomenal round. Good to see you back, Damian, and nice to meet you, Philippe. So I'm Johan, based out of Berlin, and even though you don't see that, I wear 2 hats. One is at BCG, I'm working on topics of innovation and the future of migration. So that is a research role. It's pretty amazing. In fact, they pay me to spend 30% of my time just thinking about these things and actually joining discussions like this. So I'm very grateful for that. And the result of that work, that research work at BCG, is a couple of reports that we have been writing that essentially show one thing. And that is that lots of companies do not even use the potential that is already there within the relatively liberal visa schemes that we have here in Europe. And so there's a massive culture change, in my view, necessary just to frankly advise, teach, and nudge and excite the business community to frankly do what we all believe makes a lot of sense, and that is giving opportunities to global talents willing to work here in Europe. Yeah, so that's one thing, and I'm sure, Hannah, you see that in your work as well, right? It's not just about the visa; it's about educating your customers probably as well about why they should broaden their global reach. Yeah, so that's one thing, and the other thing is that's the second hat. I am part of a team that has founded an NGO we called Imagine Foundation. It's not a foundation, it's just maybe a big name for a small Verein. But we have a big dream and a big mission, and that is to help folks from the Middle East. This is where we started, to basically help them move legally and safely into life and work and opportunity here in Europe. So in a nutshell, 4 years ago, we started to facilitate migration to Europe, which either sounds obvious and simple to you or pretty radical and crazy. But that's why I do this, because I just enjoy it. And we're now a team of more than 150 volunteers. In our Ukraine program that we launched this year, there was even more than 1,000 people that also chipped in some of their time. Super happy about localizer support. You, Hannah, and your teams really chipping in, not just a token commitment here, but really supporting us in our Afghanistan program as well. So could not be happier. And in a nutshell, what we do there is we coach people while they're still in their home countries, and basically show them if they still have gaps that they need to close in order to make it on the European labor market. Many of them, frankly, do not have hard skill gaps, but they may have soft skill gaps. So we basically teach them maybe more stringent communication. We give feedback on the level of English, and we inspire them that probably they are already ready. And we show them CVs of people similar to them. We have an app that curates jobs for them. And so we basically have built an entire program designed to make it easier for people to move across borders. Yeah, so enough from that, but happy to bring both of these perspectives in.
Thank you so much. And yeah, really happy to have all of you here. As a first question, maybe because you mentioned, I think all of three of you mentioned some of the challenges that we're facing, but at the same time, a lot of things that are happening. Really on a high level, if we especially look at Europe in a global context, what are the big things that are happening? Like, I know there's still some blockers, for example, on different countries doing their own initiatives versus like directly on the European level. But I think there's a lot of positive push as well. Like, I think governments really trying to work closer together, companies trying to contribute as well. And so a lot is happening. Like, what are the top three things you see, like the trends that are shaping immigration in a positive way? Philippe, maybe starting with you now.
Okay. I would say that first of all, there is a very long-term trend, which is the fact that Europe is associated to fighting the fight on climate and the fight on social rights and gender equality. So these are very important elements of the European brand. I think these are also very important reasons for people for wanting to come to live and work in Europe. So this would be the first factor for me. And then second one is that I think also the startups, the scale-ups landscape is really maturing in Europe. And now we see more and more very successful international global scale-ups striving in Europe. And this is also something which shows that, okay, you can build successfully a startup not only in the Silicon Valley, but elsewhere in the world, and in particular in Europe. I would give this two, but perhaps Damian and Johan would complement to find the third one.
Who wants to go?
As you wish. I can make it very quick. I think I also have two, maybe Johan has three. I think it goes against consultant souls, and I have a background in consulting, so I only have two, but I will still. I think, if you ask for big trends, the first one that comes to my mind is definitely population growth. I think, it's almost inevitable. And if you, I forgot who said this, but demography or demographic studies is the most precise social study that you can follow, because it's really it's foreseeable so easily what will happen. And there's all these numbers about, over the next 30 years, we will lose 50 million people out of our workforce. And if you don't want 90-year-olds to work or 13-year-old people, then it means that we have a problem in Europe. And I think you can see that we have now an economy which is going down due to the rising energy prices, and this will be also a huge issue to discuss in another panel. But you can see that labor shortages are still extremely high. So we have a situation where now it's hard to even, where counterintuitively the spaces for vocational training are decreasing. And the reason for that is I just learned, because the actual masters that can still teach vocational training are decreasing so rapidly. So we are basically at a moment where the whole vocational, if you want, manual labor kind of master, I don't know the exact word is, what the exact word is like it's deteriorating, and we really have no idea how to stop that even further, I think. And then the second trend that I see is an adaptation of the systems to that reality, which is that you can see that the French government, and Philippe has been part of that, are trying to attract more talent. That the German government now last week again proposed quite a strong initiative to attract more talent. So I would say the adaptation to that reality of labor shortages and changing demographics is definitely the second trend that I would see, and that's positive. Yeah? But I just wonder if we are fast enough, or whether we need to scale up, to use a word from Philippe, or speed up a bit how we react to the realities.
Yeah, so many things have been said already. So agree with all of these trends that you surfaced. Maybe two more. One is maybe one that we all know, and that is in the past, you had very few people from relatively few countries crossing international borders. And thanks to overall development, people getting richer, more educated, actually you see more and more people join the game. So I have the numbers in an article that I can put here in the chat. But in essence, I think it comes down to one thing specifically for the next years, and that is the rise of Africa. I think my personal prediction is if we in 2035 or 40, in 10, 15 years, look back, we'll say, wow, that was really when lots of Africans started moving across borders and starting to work and live here in Europe. I think we haven't even seen the beginning of that yet. So that's one thing. And then sort of connected to that, migration becoming more diverse. Today, it's still a little bit more male, maybe like this panel here, even though not as bad. I think 47% of international migrants are women, but very often they also travel with their husbands. And in my work, I'd imagine we see also more women travel individually, right? So making their own choices in life, following their own dreams and destiny, and traveling across borders alone. And as a result, we might see actually the median migrant to be a woman in the future. That's my two predictions.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think there's even, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was a YC startup that specifically focused on female engineering talent, Manara. It's super interesting because it combines the bringing women into technical focused jobs and immigration. So fully agree there. Thanks for sharing your insights. Now, maybe on what needs to change, overall, what needs to change to make Europe more friendly for international talent? I think it's not only about immigration. I also shared, and I think especially in Germany was in the news now directly when you say you want to make immigration or like also citizenship easier. People start talking about devaluing the German passport, etc. So there's like still a lot of people who have that in mind, and I think creating a good welcome culture with people still thinking like that, and also a couple of other challenges around. We still have way to go. What do you think needs to change to make Europe more friendly for international talent? Johan, maybe you can directly take that one again.
Well, the one on citizenship, I mean, frankly, I think Damien and Philip are really spending a lot of time on citizenship. If I can make only one point, making Europe more friendly for migrants broadly, hey, I see people leaving also the Berlin tech scene and going back not just to other European countries, but going home, if whatever home means. And the reason is they tell me, Johan was great, but I didn't really make many German friends. And somehow, I think there's a temptation nowadays that you can come here, you can work in English, and I love that. And but at the same time, sometimes it can be, you can live a little bit in a bubble, and at some point when people turn 30 or 35-ish, they're wondering, okay, is there a long-term future for me here? And so maybe that's the NGO scene that can step in, or any other forums, or basically we need more networks that allow people who just joined our countries to meet and mingle and contribute.
Thanks. Philippe, what's your take?
Yeah. Well, I can speak the French experience, which I know the best, of course. And I think in France, the debate is not that much about citizenship, but about a regular stay. So, the French government actually just made announcements to facilitate also the legalization of illegal migrant workers, because, well, that's a fact of life that in France, as in many countries, we have a part of the workforce that is not legally staying in France, but they are an important part of our economy, and we have to recognize that. And the current thinking is really going in the direction of legalizing these workers. And then what can we do else? More on the legal path, I would say, or the normal path of migration. What we try to do also is to simplify all the administrative stuff that you have to go through when you settle down in France, when you have to set up a banking account, you have to find a home, you have to school your children, and so on. So, and that's part also of the package we have in the French Tech Visa to help really to streamline and alleviate all this administrative burden, to make it really simple for people to settle down.
Thank you. Damien, what do you want to add?
I mean, for me, it's a couple of factors that come together. I think one is to think from the perspective of the person that you're trying to attract. We always talk about customer experience, so maybe it's important to talk about migratory experience from the perspective of the migrant. And then I think that it makes you face a couple of systems and then definitely also culture. The systems that you face is the immigration system as such, the visa system, and that's the one that I'm trying to fix a bit, and with the help of others. And I think that we need to get better, but there's some movement. And then there's the integration system, and I think there is a big work to be done. I mean, if you talk to, I talked to the hotel industry recently, because I'm trying to make them sign my letter to interior ministers. By the way, sign my letter to interior ministers if you haven't done so, to make Europe more attractive. But their core question is, as you said, Philippe, the question of what kind of skills do the people bring that they're coming, where can I use them? Are they going to be cleaning personnel? Are they going to be at the reception because then I can actually fill the form? Are they going to be higher management? And like in this whole question of integration, I think we can do better. And it's often done from a perspective that is not very holistic. And I think, for example, social housing is an element of that. Do you have concentrated social homes, or do you actually allow for social housing to be distributed amongst the city, like in Vienna? There's a lot of factors that come together in integration. I'm not an expert, but I think a lot can be done to improve there and really make it a priority. And then the last point comes to culture, and I think it's connected to the integration, but I do believe that we have a huge fundamental issue, that we are not an immigration society, that we have 27 at least different languages in Europe, that makes it a lot less attractive to come here than to, for example, to the US. And we need to actively work here because, like this typical question, and everybody knows this, but like, hey, where are you from? And then it's like, somebody says, yeah, from Germany. And it's like, no, but like, where are you really from? And then it's like, I mean, yeah, my grandparents were Turkish, but like, why, why is being German, French, and Italian still so much bound on like the looks? So the whole question of, I think, national identity and what it means to be a citizen, we need to pretty rapidly adapt. And I think that's maybe my last point. If you think about change models, you need leadership, and at the moment, it's getting better, but for a long time, and this is connected to the point that I made at the beginning, migration was so tainted by right-wing populists that normal people, let's say, from the normal political spectrum, didn't even talk about it anymore. And that made me quite sad, because it is one of the key challenges or opportunities of our time. And so demographic being the challenge and migration being the opportunity. So you need to address it as a decent politician. But imagine in the last German national election campaign, no one actually had migration on their agenda. Like I looked at the debates from the chancellor candidates. I think so. It was in the programs. Yeah, to be fair, it was in the programs. But like it was not mentioned on a high level panel when it comes to what the future should look like for the next 4 years in Germany. So, anyways, I think it's getting better, but we need to make this more prevalent. We need to discuss about citizenship in a good way, and we need to get better at integrating and attracting talent for sure.
Very true. Yeah, and also what you say, like people are afraid of really also speaking up for that topic. I'm sometimes like also catching myself when I'm on podcasts, or also now the podcast that last week, I was like, okay, let's see what comes back when you really heavily criticize how negatively people speak about migration, and really say like there's no other option. That you can get some very hefty comments, and so it's very sad like that you have to brace yourself for something like that if you speak up for migration. And I think like that in my view just can't happen. But now focusing on solutions rather than the problem. I think there are a lot of stakeholders who try to do something, and especially I think like now what we've seen is getting the private sector involved, and especially the startup world, the tech world. There is a lot of potential. And so maybe a question for you, Philippe, now, especially with Scale Up Europe. I think it's super interesting bringing together the tech founders, government. What were your learnings? What is maybe like what went wrong, what went well? How can we really use that connection in the future?
Thank you. I don't know if anything went wrong, actually.
That's good.
No, I think there is a very broad recognition that both at the level of startups and at the level of public authorities that we need to really level up our game on migration of talents, especially in the tech scene. So I think really now I was struck by the fact that I attended, for instance, an official meeting of interior ministries a few weeks ago in Prague, and I was expecting some skepticism about our work, but not at all, actually. So I was struck by the fact that there is really a broad recognition that at least for these very specific type of workers, of talents, there is a broad consensus that we should really improve things. And well, from the side of course,
Now we lost him.
Yeah.
Damien, maybe you can continue, because I also know that so with the Open Employers Pledge, for example, we try to do something similar as well, like bringing together the private sector and the government. So love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, it actually connects a bit to what maybe Philippe is back now. I don't know if he wants to continue his point.
Yeah, sorry, there was a technical hiccup. No, just what went not so good, of course, is that progress on these issues is very slow because it's still very national, and so I don't have to tell Damien that well, it's still too slow. I think in maybe.
Yeah, maybe to like super quickly build on this. I think that the pressure came maybe from something that Johan mentioned earlier, which is, you know, how sophisticated are companies at understanding that the talent pool could be much broader. And when it comes to tech talent, it was just so obvious, because a lot of the tech startups are, you know, founded with a very diverse community. They already had that in their mind, and then they said, "Oh, I want this, you know, cool programmer from I don't know where." And then so like the demand was already pretty strongly there, and so it was, I think, very natural for them to go to their governments and say, "Look, we are the cool kids on the blog. Everybody wants to have a photo with the cool unicorn founder, especially if they're from." Okay, I won't say party names, but anyways, so everybody wants that, yeah. So that's cool, like, and so they obviously have a quite direct then access to ask for this stuff. And I mean, like, the big success that we had is that actually in the Blue Card negotiations, we managed that if you have a tech background, you don't need the bachelor or master's program anymore to be able to enter the European Union, and this will get come into force, I think, in the next half year. So that's, I think, really cool. And so we have our European tech visa already, if you want, to an extent. But I definitely thought when we were negotiating it, and this goes to Philippe's point, I was like, who am I negotiating against? So there are these interior ministers, 27 interior ministers, and they're like strongly against this. And also we try to add care workers into, you know, the category that doesn't need a bachelor or master program, because I don't really know, you know, if you're a very well paid care worker and you make it over the salary threshold, why do you need a bachelor or master's degree to be a recommend? I don't know. So we tried to push it through. We didn't get it through because these 27 ministers said no. And I was like, who are you negotiating for? Like, is it, I mean, it's definitely not the employers. They don't want that. I'm not sure that it's actually in the employee interest either, because this is a limitation on job growth if you don't fill important roles either. So like, and that's why we then founded this whole idea of the Open Employers Pledge by saying, like, look, at least let's make employers louder in this whole battle of interests, whoever is against it, I don't know, to actually create pressures on the migration ministers. And I mean, just to give you again the German example, I was at a speech 2 weeks ago from Robert Habeck, was about something completely different, but he said, like, from an economy minister perspective, I want to have a lot more migration. Yeah? So why I'm not negotiating with the economy ministers, I'm negotiating with the interior ministers, and they only think about abuse and like this. So this is a structural issue that we have to bridge, and I think that would be my last point, and that's what I'm trying to do for the long-term residence directive now. Is we need to make sure that these interior ministers gain a different perspective and that they understand the challenge that we are facing from a social and economic perspective, and not only think about abuse, about I don't trust another member state because I don't know what they do, and their structures are so much worse than mine, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah? So like this really needs to be I think a mental switch. And maybe I would strongly argue, and there are some countries who do it, to put the immigration portfolio under the economy minister rather than the interior minister, just from a mindset perspective.
This is very interesting. I think, like, also because you have that point about like different ministries, like there's also development aid somehow connected, because you spend money, but at the same time, what you effectively do is if you bring people in, it's also an education opportunity. A lot of people go back at some point, even though there can be a temporary brain drain. It's very, very often going to the opposite direction as well. Johan, I know that you have your perspective there as well, especially from Imagine, and also the different stakeholders, bring them together. So I'd love to hear your take as well.
Yeah, sure. Maybe very briefly on this brain drain thing that you just mentioned. To me, I often still meet people who have some questions around it. So maybe it would be worthwhile just to spend half a minute on diffusing that fear. And that is, hey, maybe a couple of decades ago was truly the case when people left their home place and moved somewhere else, that they left and never returned, and basically the home country got the short end of the stick. But nowadays, thanks to digital technology, you actually see not just money flowing back, but also ideas and capital again, and access to networks. And so our Imagine fellows, sometimes I ask them, and they say, Johan, I don't even get the question, because the most interesting jobs nowadays in Cairo are built by people who in the 90s went to the US and then later either came back or at least brought their ideas back. So it's really creating jobs, maybe not on the first day or the second day, but in the mid to long term, for sure. That's one thing. And the other thing is, that's really something that moves me personally. I mean, hey, I think probably all of us in this room have spent some time of their lives abroad, and nobody has ever asked me, hey, Johan, why do you live in the US? You're lowering German GDP. It's bad for Germany that you're leaving. I mean, it's nearly ridiculous to even say that. Hence, I've never heard that, but it's sometimes something that we still, in a well-meaning manner, say to folks from so-called developing countries. So let's end this myth of the brain drain and maybe call it a brain gain. That was more than half a minute, sorry. And now on the ecosystem aspects, hey, I mean, even in the new German visa system, if it comes, the so-called employer-sponsored track will still be quite relevant. So like at some point, everybody who's coming into Europe for work will face this question, okay, how do I find work? And so I think there's still a lot to be done to help people actually find a job that they love. Obviously, there are a couple of NGOs and also startups involved there. And I can only say it's a very meaningful thing to do, but it's also very hard because it doesn't scale as nicely as other business models. And so I think there's a healthy room for lots of players to do that job. And what I would personally wish for is that it's becoming an activity that is supported, not through subsidies, but through, call it social impact bonds. Basically, it's a weird thing, but basically the way I understand it is ultimately somebody gets paid, but just for something socially beneficial that he or she or the organization achieves. And so in the German labor market, we currently already pay people to get some job qualification so that they don't remain unemployed. So this is already happening. And so simply extending that system to really foster a migration ecosystem, that is my personal dream. Let's see if we come to see that alive.
Thank you. Yeah, and also to the first point you made on the brain drain versus brain gain, just an anecdote. Basically, right before we started Localize, I started my career in development aid, but then thought that I can have a bigger impact on the people level, bringing people into Europe now soon as well, into the US, into wherever they want to move. I think that just creates opportunities. Education, there's so much benefit on the individual level that they can then transmit somewhere else. So yeah, I fully agree there, and really like what you said. Maybe now just talking about stakeholders and what people can do. We have a lot of HR.
If I may give you another anecdote to go into your direction, is you can see that also with football players. If you look at the Moroccan team at the World Cup, there are all players that are playing in clubs everywhere in the world, in Europe. And come back to Morocco to defend the national teams for the World Cup. So.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Like, I never thought about that, but very true, and also really good example.
Mhm.
Yeah, like the point also around now I lost I have my question there. We have a lot of HR and global mobility people here listening. What can they do? Like, how can they contribute, make immigration better, and how can their voices contribute to the debate?
Sorry, who do we have here? I just
HR, global mobility professionals, so like people working
okay.
in companies, like actually directly working with the talent that companies are bringing in. What can they do?
Sign my letter.
That's a good one. You have to
No,
post
honestly, I think outreach is so. I mean, one point is to actually, I think, as Johan said, really internally explain why there's a huge benefit in potentially attracting talent to their CEOs, and really try to make this a point. And the other, I do believe, is outreach to the Interior Ministry and saying, like, look, the rules are restrictive, get better. Like, you're not doing us a favor. I mean, I don't know, Hannah, it's also a question a bit to you, but the administration that you have to deal with, and also the logical gaps that you will probably observe in your caseworkers when they go through the application procedures. I mean, you must have a long list of demands for the interior ministers and local authorities and so on when it comes to opening a bank. I don't know, whatever there is. But like, so I think if you want this to improve, then we have to understand that from there lies power in businesses coming together and trying to say that something is not working. I think that is just a first thought that comes to my mind.
Thanks.
I think we could improve data also on the procedures and to compare the procedures between the different systems, because one obstacle we had in our work is that we actually lack data that is very accurate and up to date on how the systems work, how many people from which categories were accepted in which year, for how long did they have to wait to get their visa, and so on and so on. And these figures, perhaps Johan has some figures that I don't have, but I miss these figures actually.
Yeah, I can only agree that more data would be nice. And indeed, sometimes this isn't public yet, but we're dreaming about some kind of a place that actually at least has data on both on countries, openness, attractiveness, friendliness, long-term, also, let's say, duration of visa processes. I know Hannah and you and your teams and we've discussed that before, because you also have really cool data on the processing times. So there's definitely something to be done there. And to answer your question directly, what can HR folks do? I think even though it sounds radical to say you're hiring default global, and I know that Zalando claims that they're doing it, I believe them. So they're absolutely place agnostic. Even for some position here in Berlin, they don't care if I apply out of Berlin or somebody from out of Indonesia. They're really massively agnostic there, and obviously supported through own capabilities in-house. But all of these companies also work with folks like Localize. And so my concrete wish is, if you haven't done so, maybe start with 1 or 2 global hires, maybe have a small minimum viable team. And through that process, working with Localize, for example, you will see that it's actually not that hard. And you will, see the potential and probably then start hiring more and more globally. And this isn't just some theoretical idea. So we've seen that with companies that Imagine has worked with. I think I can mention them, Douglas, really on a quite nice digital e-commerce trajectory, doing really cool stuff there as well. And together with us, they have hired 2 software automation testers from Pakistan, and now they keep hiring more and more also themselves. So just get started.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much. Last question from my side before we open it as well to the audience. If you could change one thing in 2023, if you had one wish free, what would it be to have a positive impact on immigration? And you can just choose who wants to go first, whoever has an idea.
So anything in 2023 that we think could have a positive impact on immigration?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I have to say it because I'm negotiating this law right now. So it's called the Long-Term Residence Directive, and basically it already exists. It's called the EU Long-Term Residence Directive, and it gives people, if they want, after 5 years, a status that's a typical long-term residence status, but governed under EU law. Still, you get it from your own capital, also like from your own nation. And it's not really used that much. And what I'm trying to do, and I hope that we can finish this by fall next year, is that once you get that status, you actually get EU mobility, so freedom of movement. And for me, that would be really cool, because then basically it becomes more interesting and attractive to come to Europe, or also to remain within the European Union if you're already here and you're thinking about moving, because it's then really one labor market for those people who have this EU status. And it would become a real EU status. So then I always think about it, if you get fired in San Francisco, you can obviously in the US look for jobs, from one coast to the other. So you can go to New York or any other, Miami or wherever you want to go. Whereas if you are fired in any EU country, you're basically confined to that country. And I think that really needs to change. And one way we can change it is, we did already change it for the blue card. So with the blue card, you can go to any other EU country after 1 year of holding it. So that's really cool already. So EU mobility exists. But I think we could also now try to expand this to all long-term residents who already have a permanent status. They already showed that they contributed to one economy for quite some time and society for quite some time. And now you would basically give them the right that citizens have when it comes to freedom of movement. I mean, that would be my big dream for 2023. And yeah, let's see if we can get there. I'm 99% sure that I can. Maybe too high. 90% sure I can get it through Parliament, so it will be part of Parliament's position. I'm quite certain, and then again, the second stage will be to negotiate with the member states towards the end of the year, and I really hope that we can get there.
Fingers crossed.
My wish would be for the successful setting up of the EU talent pool that Damian mentioned earlier. Which the European Commission should set up in the coming months, because it would be very useful, first, of course, for the job seekers from elsewhere in the world to see the opportunities, first of all, and then it would be good also to help the political debate to show, look, these are the positions that are not occupied where we need talent. So really, there is a need for our economy. So it would help the debate. And for this to succeed, the European Commission cannot do it alone on its own. And we need actually an active participation of the companies, because this system can only work if the companies use it actively. So they have to do their part.
Thank you.
You probably still call on me, Hannah, right?
Yes.
Okay. So 2 fantastic points. Let me add a third one and connect it to something that I've said before. And that is, again, lots of companies still don't make full use of all the opportunities that are already available. So my very concrete wish is that many of those companies, and you know who you are, who haven't tapped into the potential, do one thing specific. I don't want to simply say hire somebody from abroad, even though that's also a good idea. But think a little bit more creatively. And what I mean is, as part of a Ukraine program, we had so many companies saying, "Would love to hire a Ukrainian refugee. We have the senior Java position open here. So if one of them knows Java, then happy to hire them." And while I get it, it's what we would hope for is to say, hey, we have this other position here. which traditionally maybe requires some German, but if we can cut the role differently, a bit creatively, maybe give some communication tasks to somebody else, we have a role here which is open for English only speaking folks, and you basically open the pool of jobs that you have available for global talents to get hired into. That's my personal wish.
Thank you so much. Now we come to questions from the audience, and we already have some. The first one is, what is your opinion? Could immigration solve the actual workforce shortages short term? Who wants to take it?
I mean, if people do what Johan said.
if only.
I don't know. Like, I think it's really a sector-specific situation where we need to look at the skills needed and whether it's a closed or an open profession. You know, like there's a lot of regulation around labor markets, but I do think that we can at least decrease the issue. Yeah? I don't know if we can, like, you know, if you look at the gap analysis, fully tackle the gap that we will face. But as I said, I don't really know another way to do it, and that's independent of short or long term. I think. I mean, there is one element which is remote work, which will also be helpful in some areas. I think to tackle labor shortages. But if you look at it, remote work, we did an analysis, can be used in all industries, even in the construction side industry, but obviously for a much smaller percentage of the job. So in the construction industry, it's a very small percentage that can be done remotely, whereas in other industries it might be bigger. So I think we will see different trends coming up to deal with this. We will potentially also see longer term, people getting older and working longer and stuff like this. But I do think migration is a key factor, even short term, to solve labor shortages.
Thank you.
I agree. I mean, if you look at the figures demographically, it's a no-brainer. But part of the equation is also lifelong education, because there is also a question of changing sectors and changing skills and so on.
Yeah. That's also a super interesting one. In my short time at BCG, I also worked on a diversity report, and I think it's also one of the dimensions that you actually get people from different sectors, different backgrounds, different study backgrounds, but also different work backgrounds. And I think that also is actually a very positive thing. It brings different perspectives and new views in. So that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Second question. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, this excites me so much. So indeed, couldn't agree more. And, we looked at this just recently again, looking at 3,000 public companies. And it's really nice, what we all believe to be true actually is true. Yeah. And so that is company. We don't have enough data, coming back to your point, Philippe, but we have data on the, let's say, global composition of leadership teams. And so we can clearly see that companies that have a more globally diverse leadership, so folks with other passports, essentially, that they tend to be more profitable and they also tend to be more innovative. Yeah, so exactly what you say, Hannah, and what seems like you calculated a couple of years ago, now on a broader sample still holds true. And I find this very encouraging because, I've done the analysis together with the team, and I know it's robust. And so we're standing on really solid evidence here, which gives them comfort.
Yeah.
If I may add, they are more profitable, they are more innovative, and they are more able also to expand internationally afterwards.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. True.
There are many benefits to it. Actually, we talked to somebody at WhatsApp. She isn't at WhatsApp anymore, but she was part of the team of the first 15-20. And she said, we built WhatsApp global first. And if you recall, WhatsApp wasn't big in the US before it was big elsewhere. And so they said they really built it with a global mindset. And you could really see it in how the product evolved and how it was adopted. And I found that absolutely fascinating. And for me, the best evidence that this actually is true. Yeah.
Yeah, no, very true, because also markets, you need the knowledge, depending on the sector, of course, but it only has benefits for product, for marketing. So I can also say that from localized perspective. So I have two questions. So I'm trying to jump to the next one. For Johann's point around the long-term retention of talent leaving Germany around 30 to 35 years old due to the lack of a social network, what is or will be done to prevent this? Because I think like also before we discussed about like what are other blockers maybe beyond immigration and like what else can we do around?
Oh, I wish I had the answer for that. So coming back to one aspect that I mentioned before, so my feeling is that some people leave if they haven't, fully call it integrated into the social fabric of these countries here. So basically people who form relationships, who make many friends here, who find new hobbies, who find a new side of themselves here. My feeling is they tend to stay, and others who, due to COVID or due to whatever reason, do not get there. I mean, not everybody is super extrovert and so on, have a harder time. So I don't know if we can somehow solve this from a political government angle. Maybe we can't. But there are many other things. I mean, let's face it, I think salaries in Germany, globally speaking, are not super high. I think people do not necessarily come to Germany to make a buck here. I mean, they go to Dubai instead. So what really draws people in is maybe the promise for their families of better health and better education. And so my feeling is people who come for those reasons, who maybe already have a family, they maybe come to stay, whereas others who are younger and maybe don't care that much about it, yet they find often more reasons to leave.
Thanks for the answer. Last question we have. If needing to invest more in one of these two, do you see more of a future trend around European cities fully embracing English in all aspects of daily life, or providing more direct or free support around learning the local language? I think like that question is very interesting, like both in Germany and France. So Philippe, maybe you wanna have a first take on the question.
Okay. Well, it's a good question. It's a very excellent question. But what I could answer to that is that actually now, of course, in almost, if not all, startups in France, English language is widespread, and people are very well aware that you have to master English and to use it into your company to make it grow and internationally. And so it's of course it's a must, and so I think we can improve perhaps the way English is taught in France, but I think it's already well taught. We have more difficulty with the German language actually in France. It should be more taught than it is right now. But at the same time, as Johann said, if you want to integrate socially, of course, at some point you will have to learn some French, and if you want really to settle down and to socialize. So I don't know if that's an answer. It's a bit of both.
Yeah. No, definitely. It's an interesting question because I think like also there, that might also be a point where some people are more or less hesitant depending on their affinity for for languages. But yeah, Damien would love to hear. I don't know if you heard the question, but basically if it's more about like all people speaking English, or if we have to invest more into local language classes, what would be your perspective?
It's a good question. I think maybe there are different tracks, like there are some people who will be a bit more nomad, and they might, with the new mobility across Europe, want to go from place to place, live for 3 years here, 3 years there, and they might be fine with that. And some who really will miss, as Johan said at the beginning, this feeling of actually making local routes and so on. And I don't know if I know the best way, but I think we should be open for both. And I very much often hear now when we create this mobility, they will never integrate, but what will that mean? And I think we should be more open that there are different ways of living your life. And if you want to be more attractive, you should open all the paths. What I think is an issue is if you don't have time to learn the language. And that I do see. Yeah? So maybe it's actually also a question to employers to say, look, you will buy, because we pay it for you every Friday, have 4 hours in the morning, or like basically the morning to learn a language, and this will not be a disadvantage for you, and this will be seen as positive. Yeah, I think something like this would really make it a lot easier. It's even an incentive to learn a language, and the language is always an asset. And as I said, it's really a disadvantage in the attractiveness in Europe that we have versus the US or Australia or other places. So I would really say, let's make it an advantage. Let's make it attractive. Let's help, with employers, maybe even with subsidies from the public sector to allow people to learn the language, but let's not force people to always, integrate in the way that we think is correct. I think that would be my answer.
Thank you. I very much agree. We are at the end already. Very, very big thanks from my side. Maybe opening it up to you. Any final words you want to share with the audience before we part ways?
It's always the politician who jumps in first. It's horrible, let's say, ego problems that we already developed after being here only 3 years. But anyways, I'll do it. I mean, my last point is, it's really like we are at this, this tipping point where we can really make things better, because there is a lot of interest. The data is on our side that Johan is digging up everywhere. And so I think we can really, really make a difference, but it does mean that we need to understand ourselves as active parts in that making the difference. And that means everyone is listening, but also all of us, obviously, trying to really understand what's in our influence and really pushing for it to be better. And then I think we have a huge power to get there. And so I thanks a lot for the great discussion, Hannah, Johan, and Philippe, and looking forward to continue to work with you and everyone who's listening on this. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, from my part, just to say, I think really now Europe is a really cool place to work and to create a startup right now, and I think everyone now is realizing that. And just what we have to do, and as you said, the corporates have a part to do there, is to lobby perhaps our governments a bit harder to facilitate the procedures, and also to participate in the EU schemes like the EU Talent Pool. But so it's a really an exciting moment, I think, to do that, and everyone can help. And thanks again for organizing the chat.
Likewise, I don't have much more to add, because I fully agree with both of you, Philippe and Damien, and I can only echo, now is the time, and I think we all have a role to play. I think 10 years ago, we would have said, oh, the politicians need to do X, Y, and Z. And you are exemplifying it, Hannah, as well, with your scale up now, not even a startup anymore. Each one of us, if we want, can shape this and make sure that migration is something that benefits us all.
Thank you so much. And yeah, really enjoyed the discussion. I have to say that it was a great lunch break. Thanks also everyone who was listening in. And now I think in half an hour, or a bit less than half an hour, we have the next panel that my co-founder Lisa is taking on again, which is about international teams and international recruiting and building international teams. I'd love to have as many of you there again as possible. And yeah, have a great rest of the day otherwise.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Tschüss.